Hi, today we are going to discuss three qualities of a good therapist. Sometimes when you go to a therapist, you're not really sure what to look for in a person. Very often people ask me this question, what should I look for in a good therapist? I'm here to tell you that there are primarily three qualities that you need to watch out for. First point is the therapist empathetic towards your situations and positions? This is something that is easier said than done. At times, what happens is, given our age and our level of experience, we find it difficult to put ourselves into the shoes of another person and start looking at the world like how the client looks. If I have a client who's elderly and I do not have experience of what it is to be at that age, it might be difficult for me. If I have a client who's a guy, it is difficult for me to start thinking like a guy given that I've been a girl all my life. So these are the situations and life positions according to which a therapist has to have flexibility, and he has to be able to get into the other person's shoes and start looking at the world the way the other person looks at it. So point number one is to be empathetic. Point number two is to be congruent. Sometime if you have gone to a therapist and you have felt some kind of disconnect, it usually happens because what the person is telling you and what the person is feeling are two different things. One is the communication, what we tell a person. The other is the non-verbal communication, which is known as the meta communication. Meta communication communicates the person's feelings, attitudes, which are more important than exactly what is being said. I once had a friend who went to a therapist and she came back and told me that the therapist had a fake smile on her face. This is what happens when what the person is thinking and doing are not completely in sync with each other. As a therapist, it is important that the person thinks, says, and does things that are completely in line with each other. That tends to generate trust in others. That makes people want to listen to us. Otherwise, it's just like giving out some kind of bookish knowledge. We study a whole lot of stuff and then we just tell people something. Sometimes we don't even mean it. It's like when somebody sees you and says, "I'm so happy to see you," but the person doesn't look happy. It is important for the therapist to be congruent, to only say what he or she actually means. The third important quality is to be non-judgmental. When the therapist is sitting with the client, he or she already has his or her own belief system. So sometimes what happens is, whatever the therapist is already thinking, person tends to project it onto the client. This is something very normal and natural. Maybe the client has done something that goes completely against the belief system of the therapist. It is difficult but very important to not judge the person for whatever he or she has done. Once we start judging them, this energy gets communicated to them. They feel uncomfortable. They feel like they are under some kind of radar, like we are watching them. This is the simplest and easiest way to switch off communication with a client. If the person feels judged, if the person feels like you are evaluating him at some level, he will switch off. He will stop sharing information, he will stop saying things to you, and then whatever time is spent in the session is sort of a waste of time for the client as well as for the therapist. So it is important for the therapist to not project his or her beliefs and values onto the client, to step into the client's world and to look at the world from his angle, to start understanding what his perspective is possibly, and to empathize with the person's situation. These are the three main qualities that you need to look for in a good therapist: empathetic, congruent, and non-judgmental. This is the perfect recipe for a great session. Another important point that I would like to add over here is, it is important for the therapist to not directly give suggestions to the client. Sometimes what happens is, we like to jump the gun and tell the person exactly what to do. This can be very risky. There is a difference between knowledge and discovery. You may know a whole lot of stuff. You may have read a lot of books. You may have done a lot of programs and courses. It may be very clear and in front of your eyes as to what the person needs to do in order to solve his situations or to improve his conditions. That does not mean that we can just go out there and tell the person exactly. We are here to support, we are here to guide, We are here to be a companion in a journey, but not exactly tell a person what to do. There are multiple risks in exactly telling a person. Point number one, it could make the person dependent on the therapist. Every time he comes back and the therapist gives him a solution, then he goes out into the world, he tries out different things, then again he comes back, again the therapist tells him exactly what to do. It's like a self-sustaining project. It's not very useful. What is useful is to empower the person in order to find his or her own solutions. That is useful. Another important point is, whose responsibility is it going to be if the therapist actually gives a suggestion? If the therapist tells a person what to do and if that backfires, whose responsibility is it? Therefore, it is important to have a person who is supporting and guiding and nurturing, but not exactly telling you what to do. If the person is doing that, then you need to see how it is helping you. These are some important qualities and salient features which I have compiled together so that you know what to look for in a good therapist.